Gemar Chatimat Tovah, as said in Judaism, meaning may you be sealed in the book of life. Today is Yom Kippur, which is 10 days after Rosh Hashanah, the head of the new year within the Jewish calendar. Yom Kippur is considered one of the most sacred holidays of Judaism. It is the Day of Atonement. We don't say happy uh, Yom Kippur because, unlike the celebration of the new year, Yom Kippur is about reflecting upon oneself. But rather than serve as a type of morbid, uh, self-flagellating attitude that one is a bad person, the Day of Atonement is about deeply reflecting and understanding ourselves. And obviously, that can come with a lot of remorse. It's very easy to see in our own lives that we make many mistakes. The Day of Atonement is about becoming one with divinity, even syllabically breaking down to be at one-ment with divinity, to be in alignment with the highest principles of divinity, of religion, of philosophy, of mysticism. Something to think about with this holiday, Yom Kippur. We decided that this practice of working with the Master Melchizedek is something we wanted to share on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, the mysteries of redemption, of repairing one's relationship with divinity, can be deeply aided by working with the spiritual master Melchizedek, who is a figure well known within the Bible and also many other spiritual traditions. So today we're going to reflect upon and practice, or share some principles of the practice of working with this great master, who he is, who is this mysterious figure, and also what are the ways that we can gain help from him. Melchizedek in Hebrew literally means righteous king. He is a mysterious figure in the Bible who anointed Abraham, after his war against the enemies of Israel. Abraham, spiritually speaking, represents our own inner spark of divinity. We all possess the potential to develop into a perfected being or master. Abraham is our own inner connection or inner being, the spark that animates all the most beautiful properties we carry within, like altruism, compassion, faith, diligence, patience. Abraham, our own inner divinity, because within each person is that connection from our own uh, depths to the heights or universal. We have our own inner divinity, our own inner being, whom we call our Father who is in heaven. Abraham, however, despite his inner glory, his achievements, his accomplishments within us, is always working under the auspices of the being known as Melchizedek. Melchizedek is the intelligence of our earth, our globe, our planet. All of nature possesses intelligence, possesses force. And while we have our own particular divinity, our own inner spirit, Abraham, represented in the Bible, there is also the intelligence or divinity of the planet Earth. And so the Earth has marvelous intelligence, is guided by many forces, which unfortunately materialistic science only sees the surface of things. But these principles or elements of nature are governed by profound wisdom of divinity. The divinity of the earth is Melchizedek. Melchizedek come from the Hebrew Melchi, meaning, or Melech, meaning king, and Tzedek, meaning righteous. Melchizedek is precisely a great king who oversees many kings. As we're performing a particular work of spiritual development in ourselves, our own inner Abraham, our own inner spirit, acquires knowledge. While we do a particular work here physically in our daily lives, the spiritual benefits or insights we gain in our work here in this physical world known as Malkut and the tree of life, the bottom sphere of this glyph, our own inner divinity, our spirit, our inner Abraham, known as Chesed in this Kabbalistic glyph, this map of the universe, the psyche, and the cosmos, gains wisdom. We are Malkut, the physical body. We are in this body. We're in this physical kingdom because the physical body is a kingdom with many elements and many forces. Malkut is called the kingdom in Hebrew. It is this bottom sphere of this map. And this map represents the full gamut of who we are, from the bottom of materiality to the heights of divinity. So the verticality of this glyph represents different subtleties, more elevated states within nature, places of the cosmos, elements of the psyche, states of being. All of these spheres relate to each other, interpenetrate, connect. Most especially within a perfect human being, these spheres are perfectly developed and in harmony with one another. So right now, we have this physical body, Malkut, which is the kingdom, our own earth. And with our physical body, we are able to perform spiritual work. We need this body in this physical world in order to be in life and to gain experiences. This body can become a useful vehicle, a useful instrument of divinity. Abraham is Hesed on the right column or right pillar of the tree of life. In the middle, Hesed means mercy. This is our inner spirit, our inner being, our inner God. However, even beyond our own particular spirit, there is something higher than that. Our inner spirit longs to gain knowledge even from above himself. That particular spark of divinity longs to acquire kingship, powers, abilities, wisdom, insights, knowledge. But he needs us. Chesed is our inner king. And above him is the top trinity of the tree of life, which represents what we can call in Christianity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. These are forces, not individuals. These are intelligences. These are principles. These are archetypes or blueprints, elements of consciousness that are very elevated, very universal, and constitute the heights of what is most divine. But also because they are so refined and subtle and abstract to us, they're very difficult to understand at our level. This tree is a map of levels of being, and we study this glyph, known as the Kabbalah in Hebrew, to understand ourselves and what we must do. We have to conquer our kingdom, our body. And our body, at the very bottom of this glyph, receives all the forces from above. We want to take, in this work, all the forces we receive from divinity in our body and to return it to divinity. And that's allegorized in the book of Genesis with the story of Abraham, how he goes to war against the enemies of Israel. Those enemies are not any person in this physical world. Israel is you can say, an anagram. Isis Ra El. In Egypt, Isis is the divine mother, the divine feminine. Sacred compassion. El in Hebrew is the singular masculine figure for God. And Ra in Egypt is the force of the highest divinity, which the Gnostics refer to as Christos or Christ. Christ is not a person, but an intelligence, a force that can be particularized within any person who is properly prepared. And that universal enlightened compassion, coupled with divine cognition of all things, is precisely the wisdom intelligence, and supremacy of God, mapped by the top trinity of the tree of life, the three primary forces of nature. So why talk about, these abstract things, Kabbalah, forces in nature, and our physical body, especially in relationship to the story of Melchizedek, the king of righteousness? It's because our spirit has said wants to fully perfect his absolute capacities within himself, which includes us, wants to perfect us. But he needs the supreme forces from above, from heaven, from the top trinity. Those spheres known in Hebrew as Keter, Chokmah, Binah, the supremacy or crown of divinity, the wisdom of divinity, and the intelligence of divinity. Forces, powers. And Melchizedek, as a figure in the Bible, is a king of that level. He is a king of that level of nature. Melchizedek is a master in nature or in the cosmos, a righteous king who is perfected. And because of his level of development, he is responsible for many spirits in this planet, many inner divinities or sparks of God, many cheseds, like Abraham. And Abraham, or originally Abraham was, from the book of Genesis, who left his father's tent to go out in the spirit of adventure to conquer his place in life. And by following his spiritual vocation, Abraham, after conquering the imperfections in himself, or the enemies of Israel, our own inner defects, he became Abraham. He became a fully developed being. Those enemies mentioned in the Bible against the state of Israel is really the enemies of our consciousness. Elements like pride, anger, fear, resentment, hatred, lust, envy. Those are the enemies of the spiritual work, the enemies of the divine kingdom. And so what we want, especially in the practice of meditation with Melchizedek, is to develop and cultivate atonement. One can work with the intelligence known as Melchizedek, the righteous king, to receive the forces from above within one's meditations so that those forces can help us. Right now, we are suffering a lot in life. We have many conflicts, many afflictions, or as Abraham was in the Bible, going to war and suffering the maximum for, possession of the within himself. We also are in a state of war. We have many conflicts and struggles. Our daily life can reflect our inner life. And oftentimes, we fail to understand that. By transforming who we are internally, we transform our situations externally. What can help us is receiving in meditation the help of this great master, Melchizedek, who is responsible for the development of any soul on this planet. Because of his hierarchy, he is responsible for governing all of us who are trying to change. And so to enter the order of Melchizedek, one has to, work on oneself. In the spirit of Yom Kippur, and to relate to the mysteries of Melchizedek, I'd like to read for you a couple verses from the book of Hebrews. It's Hebrews 5, which can clarify a few things in relationship to this mysterious figure. Melchizedek is a high priest of the Most High. A priest is really a magician. The word magush, or the root word mag from the Indo-European language, means priest, somebody who has power. Not power of a terrestrial type, but power of a spiritual type. Melchizedek is a priest of the Most High who can aid us in our meditations. And so he wants all of us to become like priests and priestesses of great nature by conquering our body, Malkut, and its energies, its forces, our emotions, understanding our mind, integrating our will, awakening our consciousness, and serving our spirit. What happens is that we develop great power, great abilities, the ability to enact virtue and conquer vice. I like to read for you these verses and like to comment upon them. And most especially when we read these comments or hear these comments, these verses, we like to connect it to Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and the mysteries of Melchizedek, as well as why one becomes a priest or, in a sense, becomes a real magician, a master of oneself. Every high priest is selected from among the people and is appointed to represent the people in matters related to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He is able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and are going astray, since he himself is subject to weakness. This is why he has to offer sacrifices for his own sins, as well as for the sins of the people. And no one takes this honor on himself, but he receives it when called by God, just as Aaron was. So a real priest or a real master of oneself, somebody who has spiritual power, abilities to patiently endure suffering and to provide spiritual benefit to humanity, is somebody who also is subject to defects. And so out of their sufferings and work upon themselves, their atonement before divinity, they are in by their works are able to approach divinity and develop a real relationship. That relationship is something we all want, or any person really wants when striving in any religious path. They want a deep connection with their inner divinity and to enact virtuous qualities in themselves to better their communities. But obviously, we are flawed. We have defects. We need help. And therefore, the forces of Melchizedek can aid us. Also, this calling is not brought upon oneself out of our own will to become glorious or to have some kind of status in society or in groups. It's about becoming humble by dying to our defects and being reborn as a new being. In the same way, Christ did not take on himself the glory of becoming a high priest, but God said to him, "You are my son. Today I have become your father." And he says in another place, "You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." During the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with fervent cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverent submission. Son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, and was designated by God to be high priest in the order of Melchizedek. So Christ is a master who became a part or member of this initiatic order. The order of Melchizedek refers to all those masters on our planet who have strived in the path of initiation. And therefore, by developing themselves and atoning for their defects, they became vehicles or conduits of God. Jesus was one master who entered the order of Melchizedek, who received Melchizedek's blessings. So if a master like Jesus, who is the highest that we know of in terms of initiatic hierarchy, to submit himself to the order of Melchizedek, demonstrates the humility necessary to become an initiate. And so this meditation that we're going to explain today can help us. Obviously, what we're going to talk about today is very heavy. It's not something that's digestible for perhaps laypersons or mainstream religious conventions. The thing to remember is that this kind of teaching about Melchizedek was something originally hidden for a long time. This practice that we're going to explain today was given by Saman Vior to his students in Mexico when he started the Gnostic movement. It was something that wasn't documented or written down by many traditions. It was something that was known by initiates within the higher worlds. States or places of experience that one can access within meditation or dream yoga. So the rest of the book of Hebrews in this chapter mentions that these truths are not evident to the masses because they are meat and or solid food and not milk. Food that is very rich and very dense and can provide a lot of fuel for our work, but also requires the stomach necessary to digest it. So hopefully today, after explaining a couple of things, it will be digestible for you and something that you can feed your spirit with. So Melchizedek was actually the first king who initiated the mysteries of the Eucharist. Many people think that Jesus of Nazareth was the only one who taught the Eucharist. The sacred transubstantiation, by which bread and grape juice, we can say, non-alcoholic wine, is transformed into the body and blood of Christ. It is a ritual that any person can perform in their home. It does not solely, it's not solely confined exclusively to a physical church. The Eucharist is a practice that any person can perform in their homes because every single person in this initiatic work is called upon to enter the order of Melchizedek, to become an initiate themselves, a real priest or priestess. So Melchizedek offered bread and wine to Abraham in the Bible. After Abraham fought many battles against his enemies, a symbol of how our own inner spirit works against our defects like pride and anger and conquers them, Abraham was offered the rites of transubstantiation. So symbolically, obviously, it refers to how bread and basically grape juice becomes the flesh and blood of Christ. And Christ, as we were saying, is the energies of the Most High. Christos in Greek means fire. It also means anointed one. Or Christos is the Greek god of fire. And Christos also means the anointed one. That fire is the intelligence of divinity within any atom, within the cosmos, from the most microscopic elements to the most macrocosmic and divine, universal, cosmic. We want to assimilate those forces within us. And so the Eucharist is a practice that we can perform in our homes to do so. Obviously, it's a separate practice from today, but that's something you can investigate from Glorian Publishing. They have a video about how to get strength, spiritual strength by blessed food and drink. It's a video about how to perform the Eucharist in your own home. But Melchizedek is the first in the Bible to initiate this sacrament. Melchizedek really gave praise to Abraham and provided this ritual for him as a symbol and also as a concrete practice for us in order to become empowered with superior forces. So here's what it says in the book of Genesis, chapter 14, verses 18 to 20. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, from the Hebrew shalom, meaning peace, brought out bread and wine, and he is the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram to the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave them tithe from all. So Melchizedek can give us those superior forces, not only just through the Eucharist, but through the meditation that we're going to talk about today. But let's unpack a bit more about who Melchizedek is, because he's quite ubiquitous and actually in many traditions. And so we'll talk about, how he's represented in some traditions like the Quran and even in some English literature of all places. So we'll unpack that. Master Moria, in a book called The Lord God of Truth Within, also explained some allusions to Melchizedek and his disciple Moses within the Quran. So I want to touch on this first because it gives some precedent for what we're going to talk about in terms of some verses from the sacred book of Islam, the Quran itself. Moria says the following, the Master M in The Lord God of Truth Within. And his verses also explain how Melchizedek is deeply related to the superior forces or energies of nature. The story of Moses and his master Melchizedek is related in the Quran. It should be read by every searcher of truth and every occult student, for it teaches that the kingdom of heaven can only be taken by energy. So obviously, we're talking about how to accumulate force. so that we have the empowerment needed to work on ourselves, so that we can atone for our defects. Moses is a great master of the divine law. And really, Moses is known for having descended from Mount Sinai and even, the Middle East or lands of Israel with the tablets of the law. He delivered the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. We have to remember that while Moses is a great master who taught humanity, he also is subservient to the Master Melchizedek. And Melchizedek governs Moses in terms of his hierarchy. This is proven within the Quran. And so I'll read for you a few verses from Surah Al-Kahf, which is the cave. We see that there is an interaction between Moses and Melchizedek. Obviously, Melchizedek is the Hebrew name of a great master, but the word Melchizedek, or better said, the figure of Melchizedek in the Quran is not named. But the Sufis, the mystical uh, initiates of Islam, the esoteric dimension of the Middle Eastern doctrine, knew this figure Melchizedek as Kedir. Kedir means green one, as we're going to unpack in the next few slides. Kedir is the intelligence of the earth, the wisdom of the planet, like the great green forests of nature that empower life on earth. Here are some verses that explain how Moses attempts to develop a relationship with Kedir, but basically Moses is not able to understand him. So this is something interesting to reflect upon because Melchizedek, in terms of his hierarchy, is very elevated, and obviously masters whose abilities supersede or transcend our own can be very difficult to comprehend, even amongst the levels of initiates like Moses or Jesus or whomever. Here are some verses that explain this point. And Moses found a servant, Kedir, from among our servants to whom we had given mercy from us and had taught him from us a certain knowledge. Marifah in Arabic, Gnosis in Greek, Da'at in Hebrew, experiential knowledge from the awakened consciousness, we can say. Moses said to him, may I follow you on the condition that you teach me from what you have been taught of sound judgment? He, Kedir Melchizedek, said, indeed, with me you will never be able to have patience. This is because his level of being is superior and more radical, revolutionary. Very hard to understand because it's so transcendent. And as he tells Moses, and how can you have patience for what you do not encompass in knowledge? Which means that obviously something that is more difficult to comprehend in terms of the origin of divine wisdom, while it's moving and powerful, we also don't understand its mystery. Like Jesus taught in the Gospels, the wind bloweth where it listeth, and none knows from whence it comes. This is when Jesus was teaching Nicodemus in book of John about being born again of water and spirit. It's interesting that these verses from the Quran are from a surah known as the Cave. What's more interesting is that we know that Melchizedek is the master of the earth, the caves of the earth, the subterranean caverns, the whole planet, its forests, its trees. Kedir means green one, relating to the earth's greenery. And Surah Al-Kahf refers to the caves of the earth in which Melchizedek is king. Because in those deep subterranean caverns of the earth are forces of nature that are very divine and sacred. And we'll talk about really how those forces can help us. Kedir is the green one amongst the Sufis. And there's an analogy to Kedir or Melchizedek in a ancient or an old poem called Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It might seem like a stretch, but really this poem from an anonymous author was depicting the knights of the Round Table, the King Arthur, Lancelot, Sir Gawain, and many other knights errant who are trying to find the Holy Grail. Remember that Melchizedek offered bread and wine to Abraham from the Holy Grail, we could say, the cup of divine redemption. our body, which can house the forces of the spirit and can become elevated within our psyche. In the myth or in the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Arthur is with his council of initiates, his 12 knights, or really you have the knights in the round table, and a mysterious knight dressed all in green, like the force of nature, enters upon the scene. He challenges Arthur and the other knights to a challenge, to a test. He says, if one of your men is brave enough, let him cut off my head. And if he succeeds, or better said, if when he does so, I too will be able to do the same to him. What's interesting symbolically about this story is that Arthur is a king. That king is our inner spirit. Arthur is our own inner God, has said, or to use the Hebrew equivalent, Abraham. That king has a table of 12 knights. The 12 knights relate to the zodiacal influences, the zodiac, the forces of the heavens above. And so a king, a real king, is a master of all the elements of the zodiac as well. The forces that emanate from the constellations and integrate with the psyche within a properly prepared individual. So Sir Gawain is one knight who basically jumps on the scene a bit hesitantly, despite how brave he is. He offers to cut off the head of the Green Knight. He does so, and I know there was a movie version that recently came out a while ago, depicting this story. Um, can't really comment so much on that, but more so on the actual poem. The poem is a great text. It's very suspenseful and deeply insightful, and esoteric especially. Gawain cuts off the Green Knight's head, but then the Green Knight grabs his head, puts it back on, and then tells Sir Gawain and the knights and the King Arthur, now, a year from now, you will have to submit your head to my axe. So he leaves. Sir Gawain, being deeply uh, focused on his honor and his vows, goes on a journey to find the Green Knight as directed by him, by this figure, and goes through a series of ordeals and challenges, tests that really question his character, his moral virtue, and his purity. I won't spoil it, but you see here that this green figure, the Green Knight, is in a sense, a symbol of nature, but also Kadir, the green one. We have decapitated those divine forces in us through wrong behaviors. We've cut off the head of our own spirituality through our wrong actions. And the way to atone and enter redemption in the spiritual path is to likewise submit our worldly head to the axe, to die to our pride, our anger, our fear, our lust, which is symbolized by the journey of Sir Gawain and how he goes through many tests and ordeals in order to accomplish that. Beautiful story, beautiful mythology, and very enigmatic. We don't know who wrote it. But Melchizedek is precisely the one who tests us. We want to enter the order of Melchizedek, the order of the kings of the divine spirit. But to enter that order, we have to die, not physically, psychologically. We have to submit our head that is attached to the world, to praise or success, decapitate our fear, our hatred, and all that baggage that keeps us down. When we do so, we are initiated. If we don't, then we fail the ordeals and perhaps we walk away and don't try again. But study that poem. It's very powerful. I won't go into more detail, but it really could be a whole lecture in itself. So in relationship to Melchizedek, we have to understand that when we are working with this meditation, we are trying to assimilate forces from nature, from the intelligence of the divine earth, the Master Melchizedek himself. I mentioned that there are forces within the interior of the earth which are very profound and powerful, but it's also important to remember that unlike some of the cosmological descriptions like Dante's Divine Comedy, that depict the inner layers of the earth as an infernal realm, there really is it's much more subtle, and there's some more nuance to this issue than is apparent by saying up or down, heaven or hell, um, spiritual regions and diabolic regions. The reality is that in the earth, we could say that there are different aspects or dimensions of our planet. We obviously know the physical world and its physical dimensions, but also there are spiritual realms associated with the interior of the earth, just as there are infernal regions associated with the interior of the earth. There are heavens and hells even within the center of our planet. These dimensions, whether superior or inferior, are states of being or consciousness that interpenetrate without confusion. Where we gravitate to depends upon our psychological state of being. And obviously, what we're doing with this particular practice is to receive superior forces from the interior of the earth, not infernal forces. So there, don't need to be afraid that, by performing this meditation on the center of the earth, one is going to assimilate hellish forces, because that's not the reality. The reality is that the earth is one thing physically. There's a superior dimension related to the earth, and there's an inferior dimension related to the earth as well. Here's what Samal Envir had to say in the Gnostic Bible, the Pistis Sophia Unveiled, about that. Let us then distinguish between what is the merely geological, physical, and tridimensional part of the earth, and what are the superior dimensions and the infradimensions of the interior of the earth. Let's elaborate on how this plays out. So we talked about the tree of life, the map of the universe, map of our psyche, but also map of dimensionality. This tree of life and its shadow, the Klipoth in Kabbalah, represent heaven and hell. These are states of being, but also places in nature that we gravitate to when we physically go to sleep. So when we physically dream or physically go to bed and we dream, we often occupy internal regions of nature. We are interacting with states of matter and energy and perception that are not physical. Now, whether we go up in this glyph or go down depends upon our level of being. If we're way down by anger and pride and fear, then obviously we might experience states that are infernal. Many of us have had that experience already. We call them nightmares. But there is also the potential not merely to experience inferior states, but superior ones, heavenly states. In the infradimensions of the Earth's core, there is forces that relate to hell. And obviously the infernal regions of nature have a reality, not physically, but spiritually speaking. All of our defects belong to hell. And so what we want is to purify those elements that are within ourselves, within our earth, within our body, that keep us attracted to lower dimensions within our inner experiences. So something to reflect upon too is that we don't want to confuse the two. Superior dimensions, inferior dimensions, but also how they are manifest within the earth. Within the superior dimensions in the center of the earth, we find forces that are positive, which is what we want to work with when we pray to Melchizedek. We're working with the superior forces in the center of the earth. One thing to remember too is that in relationship to this glyph, the forces of divinity descend from heaven, from the heights of the tree of life, down into our physical body, but also enter the earth. And so when we're working with Melchizedek, we're asking that those forces which descend within the center of the earth also are going to help us. So the forces from heaven, but obviously when those forces enter us, and because we have created our defects like anger and pride and resentment, we take those forces from heaven and we have channeled them within our own inner negativity. The thing to remember is that Melchizedek can teach us how to work with these forces in a positive way so that we can liberate ourselves from those negative elements. So rather than feeding anger and pride or resentment, we work with positive influences to help teach us how to change. But those forces exist in the earth. Here's what Samal Envir had to say about it in the Gnostic Bible, the Pistis Sophia Unveiled. In the Averno, hell realms, there exists the darkness, and also the darkness of the darkness. The Averno is found situated within the nine submerged mineral infradimensions. These nine infradimensions are within the interior of the planet Earth. Nevertheless, do not confuse the nine submerged infradimensions with the merely geological part of the world Earth. It is useful to clarify that the merely physical geological part of the world Earth is hollow. Spiritually speaking, there are temples within the center of any planet, not just physically, but spiritually and within the internal worlds. There are temples governed by the intelligence of any planet. There is a heart temple within the earth, which is the home of Melchizedek. There is the heart temple within the planet Mars, within the superior worlds, which is the abode of Samael, the angel of war. There's also a heart temple in the center of the planet Jupiter, which is where the angel Zachariel reigns. Those gods or divinities, masters, are the intelligences of those planets. And so they work to elevate with their forces within nature all beings. So with Melchizedek, we're accessing the superior dimensions of the planet Earth. Salman elaborates the following, again in the Gnostic Bible, the Pistis Sophia Unveiled, where you find reference to the superior forces of the interior of the Earth. Nine superior dimensions also exist within the interior geological part of the world, the sacred temples of the conscious circle of the solar humanity, which are all the beings who have mastered or perfected themselves, and which operates upon the superior centers of our being, our psyche, our mind and heart, are found situated within the nine superior dimensions. Creatures and terribly divine forces operate in the nine superior dimensions of the planet Earth. One thing we'll mention is that we are accessing these forces by elevating our mind and heart. We open up faculties of the psyche, known within esoteric psychology as the superior mind and superior heart, superior intellect, and superior emotional centers. These are states of consciousness that are virtuous and divine, positive, spiritual, elevated, qualities like compassion and altruism, insight and wisdom, patience and fidelity, as compared to negative elements that we typically experience in our hearts, like anger, resentment, egotism, desire. So in meditation, we can open up by relaxing our mind, body, and heart, and opening up our hearts and minds to superior influences. We can receive wisdom or revelations within meditation and receive the forces of the interior of the earth, which are superior. I know we've talked about the tree of life quite a lot. As I said, the tree of life is a map of the universe and the psyche, but also it references the spinal column. The spinal medulla is a tree of life. Our spinal column is what unites our kingdom. Our body would not be able to operate in the world if it weren't for our spine. And so our spine and our body is the receptacle by which forces can rise from our creative forces, our sexual glands, up our spine, to our mind, and then to our heart. As I said, all the forces of divinity descend from the heavens above down into our physical body, even entering into our sexual energy. So if you've studied Salman Vyor's writings for quite some time, you know he spends quite a lot of detail explaining the value and necessity of conserving the sexual force. This is the energies that we receive from divinity that can create life physically, but also can create spiritual life when we conserve it and use it intelligently, spiritually, with wisdom. We conserve that power. We elevate it up our spine through spiritual practices and meditations. We elevate it through the perfect matrimony, through a marriage. And by the force of love and the merits of our heart, that force rises within us. This is how one enters the initiations of Melchizedek within the order of this divine master. It's described in books like The Perfect Matrimony, as well as Mystery of the Golden Flower by Salman Vyor, as well as the Major Mysteries. Basically, we can also refer to this tree of life within Gnostic terms, strictly speaking, meaning technically speaking. There are 13 aeons, 13 spheres of being. You obviously see the tree of life, which have 10 spheres. Each sphere is an aeon. An aeon is we can say, a level of being, a state of nature, a place in dimensionality, could also relate to aspects of our consciousness. We go from the bottom up. You see that Malkuth is the first aeon, and the higher up you go, even to the 10th aeon, you see Keter, the forces of the Father. Beyond him are three more. That is known as the absolute within the Gnostic tradition. The absolute is, in Gnostic terms, agnostos theos, the unknown divinity. We call him the 13th, 12th, and 11th aeon, or in Hebrew, Ein Sof, Ein Sof Or. Ayin in Hebrew means nothing. It is the cosmic space from which any universe or light emerges in order to create spiritually and physically. Ein Sof means limitless. It is our point of departure, spiritually speaking, a point of light of divine being and wisdom that we seek to return to, our own inner highest divinity. And the Ein Sof Or is the limitless light of Christ that emanates from that unknown regions of unmanifested reality in order to create manifested cosmos and reality. The tree of life, with its 10 aeons or 10 spheres, is manifested existence, which emerges when that light of divinity comes from the void, from the unknown, from the nothingness. The cosmic space, which is eternal, was never created. It is the some zero point from which everything emerges and everything must return. And is the goal of the Gnostics. If you've studied specific Gnostic scriptures like the Nag Hammadi, you see that they talk a lot about the aeons, these, which can represent masters of certain levels of nature associated with this glyph, but also the aeons represent dimensions. And by studying some of the Gnostic scriptures, you find that our soul, Sophia, longs to return to the unknown origins from which it came, from which she came, our soul, our consciousness. And so those forces are striving to return back to the origin because they came from heaven and now descended to our physical body, to the first aeon from above. And now we seek to return those forces up within ourselves for our spiritual development and for the benefit of humanity. Why 13 aeons associated with the practice of Melchizedek? The meditation related to Melchizedek is practiced on Saturday the 13th. So there are a few years, or once a year, usually there is a Saturday that falls on a 13th of a month. And especially on Saturday the 13th of any year, which can happen multiple times a year, we can perform this meditation in relationship to Melchizedek. 13 relates to the 13th aeon, the heights from which we emerged, spiritually speaking, which we seek to return. And so on the 13th day, or Saturday the 13th of any year, the forces of Melchizedek are supremely vibrant. So just like nature has its ebbs and flows, forces in nature rise and fall like the rhythm of the tides in an ocean. Likewise, when the forces of Melchizedek are active, or on the 13th or Saturday the 13th of any year, the forces of Melchizedek of the earth are vibrating intensely. And that gives us an opportunity to work more intensely on ourselves and receive help from this master. Melchizedek is mentioned in the Gnostic Bible, known as the Pistis Sophia. And in the Pistis Sophia Unveiled, Samal Vior gave some commentary about the nature of these verses. In it, you see that Melchizedek is mentioned about how he is the one responsible for carrying the lights of the spirit, the lights of our energies, the forces within us from our inner Malkuth or kingdom, up our spine to our mind and then to our heart. And even cosmologically speaking, those forces help us to lead us to the truth. The higher levels of nature, the most higher regions of the cosmos are known as the treasury of the light, which is the Ein Sof, Or in Kabbalah, the limitless light or forces of divinity. Here is what the Pistis Sophia has to say about this. Zora Kothora, Melchizedek, carrieth off the lights and leadeth them unto the gate, which in Kabbalah we can call Yesod, of those of the middle, and leadeth them into the treasury of the light. The gate is Yesod that leads up to heaven. Yesod in Hebrew means foundation. And if you take the tree of life and map it on the human being, you find that the sphere of Yesod is associated with the sexual organs. As we've explained other times, our sexual forces really are the power of any real master or magician, because it is the power of life that can create a physical child. And when we harness that force in a marriage with love and with wisdom, with skill, we can take that force and elevate it up from our spine to saturate all the aspects of our consciousness, from the lowest to the heights. Yesod is really the ninth sphere, we say in the Kabbalistic tradition. And that ninth sphere is in relationship to really our center of gravity. The center of our earth, we could say, our body, is Yesod. You may be familiar with the Divine Comedy of Dante, where he depicts the ninth sphere of hell. And in the ninth sphere of hell, you find that the devil is at the maximum point of suffering. You also find that in the story, Dante descends upon the back of Lucifer and climbs upside down because at that point he's at the center of the earth and gravity switches on him. So he flips upside down and climbs up the back of Lucifer in order to emerge on the other side of the planet. So even Dante knew at that time that yeah, the earth was a globe and he descended, spiritually speaking, to the center of the earth, the ninth sphere, the well of maximum gravity, the weight of the world, in order to basically go off to the other side and transcend hell itself and to enter a state or begin his journey upon purgatory, which is another stage of development. Purgatory, purgatorio, purgation, to purge one's defects. What Dante was depicting in the Divine Comedy was how we must descend into hell, face ourselves, our worst defects, and emerge off the other side with wisdom. He does so by entering the ninth sphere. And that's a allegory of working with the powers of Yesod. The creative force, the sexual energy, that power is what can make us an angel or a demon. And it's very evident and easy to see how. How we use the sexual force can empower ourselves spiritually and make us divine creatures, or it can transform us into beasts. And so the ninth sphere is where gravity is most heavy. And we find that really in society in the world, our center of gravity tends to focus around sex, but obviously not in such good ways. It permeates all of our relationships, the way we interact with people. It modifies how we see ourselves in the world. And it is the center of gravity of many people. But we want to take those forces, that well of gravity, that center of our earth, and to elevate it and make it spiritual, make it sacred. In the myth of in the Gnostic Bible, we see that Melchizedek takes the lights from the gate of Yesod and raises them up the middle, which is our heart. The middle of the tree of life is our heart. The middle sphere, known as Tifereth, we could say, willpower. And it is only through the merits of our heart is by which we can enter the spiritual path of initiation. And by raising those forces up the middle, it leads us to the treasury of the light, which is when the light of our creative forces saturate our head and make us wise. Those forces have to be elevated and spiritualized and not expelled and made something animal. So Melchizedek is an intelligence that can teach us how to do that and show us how to face ourselves, enter the center of the earth of our psyche, and to confront the worst in us so that we can atone for our defects and to elevate our spirituality. Some uh, notes to remember. A lot of people have become confused about when to practice this meditation. Some people have said it's 1 p.m. Basically, it's the 13th hour. We want to practice this meditation on any Saturday, the 13th, at the 13th hour. That's the most optimal time to practice. It's not to say that you can't perform this meditation on Melchizedek on any other day, mean, you could do it tonight, since it's Yom Kippur, it's a sacred holiday, but it's especially powerful on Saturday the 13th. The next Saturday the 13th is in December of this year. And you can practice at the 13th hour, which is 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. This meditation should last an hour. The way we calculate this is based on starting from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m., which is the first hour of the new day, followed by 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., the second hour, and so on throughout the middle of the day, which is 12 p.m. to 1. That's the 13th hour. Why 13 in relationship to the Day of Atonement and the death of one's defects? Melchizedek can help us work on our defects. He can teach us about ourselves. And also, 13 is a number that is associated with, obviously, with the tarot, sometimes death. People think of 13 as an unlucky number. It's unlucky for the populace, but it's actually a good number for initiates. 13 within the Eternal Tarot of Alchemy and Kabbalah, available through Glorian Publishing, depicts 13 as the tarot or arcanum of death as immortality. You see a figure here reaping wheat with a scythe, a symbol of Saturn and death. Only by dying can we give birth to what is new. Only by eliminating anger can we give birth to serenity and sweetness. Only by eliminating lust can we give birth to purity. Only by eliminating greed can we give birth to altruism. Through the death of our desires and defects, we reap the wheat and transubstantiated bread of divine wisdom. Arcanum 13 is related to really that, the law. And you have to remember that the tarot themselves are symbols that represent, usually in Egyptian iconography, principles related to the psyche and our spiritual development. So 13 is a very deep card, the immortality of our spiritual life, which comes about when we get rid of problematic emotional and psychological states, which create suffering for ourselves and for others. So Melchizedek can especially help us on Saturday the 13th. I kind of mentioned this already. Our center of gravity tends to be within lower states of being. We need to awaken superior states of consciousness. So this meditation is deeply related to how we open up our minds and hearts to superior influences. We explain some of the cosmological backgrounds of what those forces are, but now we're going to talk about how to actually practice this meditation, how to actually be conscious of those forces, and how to assimilate them with understanding. This meditation will also teach us how to verify these things for ourselves. Meditation is a state of being in which we can access information that is not accessible to the senses. So primarily we want to shut down our sight, our hearing. We want to relax our body, become conscious of our mental, emotional, and physical states. We want to relax our thoughts. A mind that is often churning with associative thinking is one that is distracted. We want to relax that. We don't want to be thinking, churning in our mind about our past or things we're worried about. We want to put that aside. We want to relax the intellect where we don't preponderantly focus on memories or ideas or projects. We don't let the mind wander off. But this is not something that's forced. It's something that's achieved or cultivated through serenity. It's not something that involves exertion or willpower of a kind of like a coercive or subjugating type. To relax the mind and also our emotional states is about becoming conscious of what we're actually thinking and feeling and observing the fact. We observe the state of our psyche and we don't feed into whatever negativity or associations emerge within the screen of our awareness. We watch. You relax your mind and heart and even your body by becoming aware of it. You see it. It's not an intellectual process. It's a conscious state. It's a perceptive state. It's learning to pay attention to what we're actually experiencing and to create a sense of separation in which we as a consciousness are like a director watching an actor in a film. Whereas before, throughout the day, we may be observing ourselves and taking note of our perhaps qualities that are problematic for us, states that make us suffer, and taking observation notes psychologically, consciously observing the fact. With meditation, we're taking that same skill of self-observation, data collection, awareness, mindfulness, continuity of attention, self-perception, remembrance, and we're learning to deepen that in a more profound degree. But that only comes about if we're fully relaxed. We have to adopt a posture that's calm and serene, one that doesn't strain our spine too much. We can let go of tension. We become aware of the body. We relax it. There are many different types of relaxation exercises you can do. One thing is to inhale profoundly through your nostrils. Focus on the areas of your body that are tense. Imagine that light descends to those aspects of the body that are tense, the muscles. And when you exhale, you can imagine like a black smoke leaving your lungs. Imagine that all the tension in that part of your body is leaving. Relaxation is essential if we want to awaken superior emotion and superior intellect. Rather than engage with lower centers of our psyche through negative emotion or impulse to move or instinct, desire, or lust, or a mind that wanders, we instead calm those aspects of ourselves and allow our heart and mind to reflect superior qualities. Imagine that the psyche is like a jar filled with water and sediment. If you let it sit still, the waters will become clear and the contents will be less murky. And eventually, with enough stillness and observation, you find that all the mud and dirt and rocks and sediment will stratify into layers and settle. The same analogy applies to our psyche. When the waters of the mind and heart are calm, they can reflect superior imagery. This is why when we relax, we are able to enter a state in which we're almost able to fall asleep. We want to control our ability to be attentive, be conscious, but also let the body relax to the point that there's no tension and that your body wants to fall asleep. It's not something involuntary, it's something voluntary. And that's the difference. We want our attention to be aware, but our body to be fully relaxed to the point of drowsiness. In that way, the emotions and mind can learn to awaken to superior states. When the water is clear, it can reflect heaven. And what happens is that typically our center of gravity psychologically, what we are most identified with in our daily life, tends to be negative emotions and memory. We change that by becoming aware of this glyph, this human machine. It's not only just the body, but also all the constituents that make up our psychological mechanisms, what makes us tick, so to speak. Maybe emotionally or mentally, we are like a lot of ideas or we're addicted to praise. We have many mechanisms or reactive states that come to us usually without our will and tend to be uncontrolled. But through this practice, we're learning to become aware of that in the first place so that we can understand it. Superior emotion and superior intellect have to do with qualities of the heart and mind that are divine. And these are states or qualities that have nothing to do with our typical animal life, our egotism. They are qualities that are represented by the virtues of any master that we see in history, like Jesus or Buddha or Moses or Krishna. And then when our mind and heart are able to receive insight, because it's not something that's constructed, it's something that is received through revelation, we can reflect higher qualities and emotional states. You can actually qualify the superior emotions to states of devotion that are very prayerful and sincere, full of longing. Could be one filled with emotional remorse, because crying and tears are not necessarily a bad thing, but can be conscious, spiritual, when it's sincere and profound. You also hear similarities of these superior emotional states within great music, like the classical composers Beethoven, Mozart, Wagner, Liszt, Chopin, Tchaikovsky, uh, Berlioz, Bach. Their music depicts the full gamut of divine emotion. And if you want to learn what those emotions are, we can study that music because those are initiates who compose those works to teach us about the superior emotional center and the mysteries of divinity. The superior intellect is wisdom that we acquire through study of scripture. Now, merely just from reading, but from meditating and understanding what we read from experience. So we need those two qualities to fully practice this. In order to really meditate effectively, we have to be sincere and have an open mind and heart. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but to really pray effectively in this exercise is to have a communication with divinity. A lot of times we may be familiar with how to pray certain formulas, but prayer is also a relationship. It's not about talking into the void, it's about receiving an answer. The way that we receive that insight or wisdom is when we turn off the noise in our intellect, in our body, in our heart. When the mind is still, the heart is calm, we have pliancy of attention. We're able to focus on one thing. We're not distracted by memories of the past or fears of projects in the future, but we remain open to the moment. That's when images, dream symbols, mystical experiences can emerge within our psyche, but only if our body, mind, and heart are still. If the waters are churning and if we're moving our body within the meditation, we're not meditating. We're scratching an itch, we're adjusting our posture, we're not getting anywhere. That's why it's essential to master the body. And in the words of Shivananda from the yoga tradition, our body and posture has to be as still as a mountain, immovable. So pick a posture that works for you. One meditation posture that a lot of people practice in this tradition with this exercise is to perform the microcosmic star, the five-pointed star, to lay one's hands out, extended, arms extended, and legs outward. Head pointing towards the north, typically. That's one way to meditate and relax and pray, but it's not good if you fall asleep completely and forget that you're meditating, because then we're not receiving any answers within our practice. But to pray is to talk with God, according to Saman Vior. It doesn't mean to talk to God, it means to talk with God. We have a relationship because we're able to receive those experiences within meditation in the form of imagery or visions, which teaches how to resolve our problems. Basically, meditation is founded on concentration and imagination. So we kind of touched on this already. We experience reality, the truth. We have visions in meditation when we are able to focus on one thing and to visualize. Concentration means to focus on one object, to ask a question of whatever you need in the moment for your meditation practice, your focus, and to not be distracted by any daydreams, memories, fears, preoccupations, worries. It means to serenely attend to the object of your meditation. There are many exercises to build concentration. One is to focus on a candle. You observe the flame and watch how your mind wanders. And just gently bring your attention back to the object of your concentration to focus on that one thing. A candle is particularly dynamic and useful because the flame is something nuanced. It changes within every moment. You can focus on a stone or an object that draws your attention, and whenever your mind begins to wander, you just gently bring your attention back, focus on what you're observing and observing what you're thinking, what you're doing. Concentration gets strong through practice. And imagination is another skill that we need. Imagination is the ability to visualize. So if you have trouble visualizing, you can take that candle and simply look at it for a few moments, close your eyes, and just try to see it. This skill can be developed with more color and vibrancy, more sustainability for prolonged periods of time through practice. Concentration and imagination are the two skills needed for meditation. The word meditation comes from I believe the Sanskrit di, which means to see, dhyana. Dhyana meditation is the ability to perceive internal images. If we don't know how to see internal images, we can't meditate because we're not seeing what we need to see from divinity. Concentration usually needs to be developed first because if the waters are agitated in our mind, we can't reflect superior images on the surface of our superior intellect or be reflected within our superior emotional center. That's why serenity, calm abiding, we can say in Buddhism, a calm heart, stability of concentration are the essential parameters by which to experience what this meditation has to offer. We also pray. At the beginning of this practice, we pray for the irradiation of love. We say in our heart to develop superior emotion. May all beings be happy. May all beings be joyful. May all beings be in peace. Followed by the mantra, Aum, 3 times, prolonged. We can imagine the planet Earth. We can imagine a beautiful light emanating from our heart. We want to evoke a feeling of altruism and compassion for humanity's suffering. We want to understand the suffering of others and to have compassion for them. If we struggle with compassion for others, we can reflect upon our own emotional states. Try to understand that perhaps bitterness that we may feel to humanity or to others, it can be difficult to achieve because a lot of us have a lot of suffering in life. But the essential point of this practice is that in order to change, we have to have love for humanity. We have to feel compassion for the suffering of others. That helps to ease the fire of our own sufferings. When we truly love others and where they're at spiritually, we can give strength not only to others, but to ourselves. Because compassion and giving of our heart to wish peace and joy and happiness for all beings is how divinity can operate in us. If we want that flow or influx of force from Melchizedek and divinity to enter our heart, we should have that feeling of altruism and happiness, goodwill to others. By irradiating love, we receive love. All the happiness of the world is achieved through loving others, having compassion for others, according to Shantideva and the way of the Bodhisattva. And all the suffering of the world is wishing happiness for ourselves. So it's a paradigm shift, essential one for understanding this meditation. After we do that prayer, we recite 3 times. Holy and blessed be his unpronounceable name. Now that the sacred mystery of the letter has been verified. Meanwhile, I shall proceed towards more occult places. This prayer is basically explaining that the name of divinity is sacred. Our own inner divinity has his sacred name. And now that we are verifying the mystery of the letter, we're verifying what the books of this tradition are teaching. We're seeing from our own experience these realities. We're now proceeding towards more occult places, meaning the hidden. Occultism or the occult means to cultivate that which is invisible. Unfortunately, the term occultism has a bad rap, but here it means to cultivate that which is hidden, which is superior, which is divine. We pray this 3 times. We pray for divinity to be in our hearts, and then we ask our inner God, my being, my God, my beloved, you who are my true self, I beg you with all of my heart, with all of my soul, with all of my faith, to transport yourself and to transport me to the center of the earth. You can imagine yourself descending into the caverns of the globe. You can visualize entering the darkness of the earth, past its many layers, within your astral body. And the point is not to think about doing it, but to visualize it. You want to see it. To visualize and to imagine is to see. It is the ability to see reality. And oftentimes, we often think of imagination as something in our culture as something arbitrary and fantastic, fake. But with the type of imagination we're cultivating, we're trying to see within our psyche this reality. We're descending into the earth. We want to approach the temple of the king Melchizedek. We can descend into the earth. And as we're imagining, we ask our inner God, my being, my beloved, please conduct me into the temple of Melchizedek. When you approach, you can imagine a golden temple, massive doors, beautiful ornaments, whatever your imagination shows you. Don't try to force it, but hold it in your attention and allow your imagination to show you what is there. In a sense, it's like the times we were young children who might have listened to bedtime stories where something was read to us and then we imagined it and we could see it with a lot of vibrancy and color. It's the same skill, but cultivated with intentionality, with an adult experience, with an adult mind. You ask your inner God, approach the sacred door of the temple and knock 3 times before the entrance. You can imagine 2 pillars, as in the Masonic temples of Jachin and Boaz, the pillar of mercy and the pillar of severity, also represented by the tree of life. You wait and then imagine that the door opens. A guardian stands there with a sword drawn. Every temple has its guardians. Every temple has its masters who protect the precinct. You can say, with closing your or laying your left hand on your solar plexus, your abdomen, and extending your right hand in the form of the pentagram. Your middle, index finger, and thumb extended, and your ring finger and pinky closed into your palm. That forms the sacred sign of the pentagram, the sacred star. That 5-pointed star is the symbol of a perfected human being. The upright pentagram represents a human being made into the image of divinity. The head pointing upwards, the arms extended, and the legs out, which you could be meditating in the form of the pentagram with your stomach to the earth. And that's one other detail we want to mention as well. If you're out in nature, this is the best time, the best place to do it. You can meditate with your stomach to the ground and your arms and legs extended in the form of the pentagram, because you want to receive the forces of the earth within your abdomen, and that you're imagining yourself going to the earth. You're connecting with the earth itself. The guardian sees you greeting him, and you say inferential peace, which means peace unto your innermost divinity. It's a sacred salutation for entering Gnostic temples. The guardian will look at you and say inferential peace, radiating love, but also perhaps sternness, seriousness, solemnity. You then cross your arms over your heart. Your left hand on your heart, your right hand over your left. This is the symbol of Egyptian pharaohs, where the right hand conquers the left. It's a symbol of how divinity is governing over our imperfections. The right hand over the left, over your heart. You bow to the right pillar and say, Jachin, and then bow to the left pillar, Boaz. Those 2 pillars represent man and woman, male, female, mercy and justice. And their balance and equilibrium is the perfected heart. The guard at the temple will say, enter. Step in with your right foot into the precinct, and then approach through the antechamber towards the main court of the King Melchizedek. You imagine approaching a gigantic and golden throne upon which enters or rests the King Melchizedek. Here, we pray to our inner God. Approach the 7 sacred steps before the altar of divinity and prostrate yourself before this great Master Melchizedek. You imagine yourself bowing with your innermost in whatever form he appears. And you pray, Melchizedek, 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 great God of the earth. I call upon you, I beg you to help me. Please assist me with this particular struggle that I am having. And whatever comes to your mind, what you're working on, maybe you're working on a certain ego, a certain defect, like pride or anger or fear in your life. Maybe you have a problem that you're dealing with, spiritually speaking, or a situation in your life in which you have a lot of confusion and pain that you need insight regarding, insight about how to resolve. Pick a problem that is spiritual and psychological, something that is making you suffer a lot from and that you want to atone for and to understand. You pray to Melchizedek and whatever words come to your heart. You don't need formula for this. When you're praying and you're prostrating before divinity or before Melchizedek, you can perform a series of mantras. Aum Tat Sat. So the way that you perform that mantra is prolonged. Uh, it might be hard to hear through the microphone, but I'll try. But if you're wondering how to pronounce this mantra, we'll have it available on our website, chicagognosis.org, under the guided practices section that you can find on our website. The mantra is prolonged like this. Tat, sat, You can repeat that mantra for however long you need. Imagine that the forces of Melchizedek are entering your mind, the light of divinity, which comes from the 13th aeon, the absolute. Imagine that light saturating your psyche, filling you with a lot of power and love, serenity and strength. Imagine Melchizedek in whatever form emerges comes to you in terms of your imagination. As I said, don't force it, but pay attention to it. See what arises, what novelty emerges. Pray for an hour. Meditate for an hour from 12 to 1 p.m. As you're doing this practice, you're opening your mind and heart. And after you perform that mantra a few times, imagining light entering your mind and heart and body, you can then focus on whatever imagery emerges. Just wait, observe, see what revelations appear within your psyche. Sometimes that wisdom will come in the form of images or experiences, things that you'll see in your meditation that will be symbolic and represent what you need to work on. When you're finished with the practice, you can perform the microcosmic star. In this PDF, we included a link to the video from Glorian Publishing. Basically, you stand up, you give thanks to your inner God, you say, "My being, my God, my beloved, I thank you for helping me to perform this ritual, this practice for Melchizedek, and I ask that you guide me in the days to come with all my love and faith in you and in divinity and humanity." Extend your arms outward. You raise them up to your head, palms together, touching above your crown. Bring your hands down to your shoulders. Extend them outward again. Have them descend down over your sexual organs, right hand over the left. And as you inhale, you bring your feet together, right to left, and bring up your hands to your heart. That pentagram helps to seal our energies. You can also, and it might be harder to do over Zoom, but basically you could, with your hand in the form of the pentagram, like we did previously, you trace a circle in front of you from right to left, like you're turning a steering wheel in a car, making a left turn. You trace a circle around yourself, or basically before that, you cross yourself in the form of the cross. You bless yourself in the name of the Father, in the head, before your third eye. Bring your hand over to your heart, and then say to the sun, and by the sun, and then draw your hand down towards your sexual organs, and then raise them up to your left shoulder, and then to your right shoulder, and in the name of the Holy Spirit. And then you trace yourself that circle from right to left, like making a left turn in a car. And by the holy tetragrammaton, tracing from your head down to your left, down to your knees, up to your shoulder, right shoulder, and then up to your head. Make a full circle. Take one finger, perform the rune Sig. That rune is with a mantra. Runes are a form of yogic postures that we adopt in order to assimilate energy, but also to seal our energy itself. You trace your finger downward in the form of a lightning bolt into the mantra S. That is a rune or posture, a prayer that seals your energies so that the forces you accumulated from this practice will guide you. In the end, we thank Melchizedek with all of our heart for receiving whatever blessings he may have given us. And as a side note, again, you can perform this practice any Saturday the 13th and even on any day you want. The important thing is that we're sincere and open and praying fervently. Saturday the 13th is a great day to do it, but it can be performed on any day of the month. I know we went quite a long while. It's been a bit of a long lecture, but I wanted to give us a lot of time to explain a lot of the nuances of this practice. It's a very profound exercise. I hope that you can practice this in your home anytime you need. As I said, we practiced this in our center in Chicago. It was a great experience. I got a lot from that meditation myself, and I hope that it can help and benefit you. So if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat. We have a question. I am seeing a lot of images in meditation, but when I try to interpret it, I notice that the interpretation comes from my mind, so I can't trust it. Moreover, I don't know if the images are coming from my being or from my ego. Also, I am seeing a lot of images of monsters in meditation. When I look into their eyes, they look back with a lot of consciousness. It's intimidating and I back down. What do you recommend? Actually, this is a great insight. You're basically seeing the reality of yourself. The fact that you're recognizing that the images you see in your meditation are, you know, something you can't trust, it's good to have that type of inquisitiveness and scrutiny of your own perceptions. If you weren't questioning what you see, there'd be a problem, right? I mean, we can have a lot of images in meditation, but if we're not discerning with our heart, our conscience about what is real, then anything can emerge in our mind and we can just go along with it. So the fact that you said you're having a hard time interpreting, you can't trust what you're seeing, can't tell if it's from your being or from your ego. You also did say though, to, kind of empower you with this, is that you're seeing a lot of monsters in meditation, and that when you look into their eyes, they look back with a lot of consciousness, and that it's intimidating and that you back down. I think what's going on here is that you are seeing some things that are legitimate. You're really seeing your mind. You're seeing monsters, and those monsters are perhaps your own defects. Could be pride, could be anger, could be fear, it could be many things. So the fact that you're seeing these elements and it evokes a sense of fear in you, I would meditate on the fear. Like meditate on your reactions to what you're seeing. Because the reality is that a master can look at these images that are very disturbing, conventionally speaking, and can see them for not just see them for what they are, but not be afraid of them. We shouldn't be afraid of our mind. We shouldn't be afraid of ourselves. But it's hard. It's hard to not feel fear when there is, we see something perhaps imagistically that it could be disturbing. Meditate on fear. Reflect on your fear. What is it in you that doesn't like to see these elements? Is there an element of denial or maybe whatever his thoughts are that doesn't want to confront it? Focus on the fear. Imagine where in your life you feel fear. Visualize or observing yourself throughout the day, as we were talking about throughout these courses and everything, but you can take the time to meditate on fear. What are your reactions to what you're seeing? Because rather than the image itself of monsters that's disturbing, it's really the reactions that you're having towards them. You know, and as for backing down from them, like, yeah, there may be times where it's important to kind of shift gears where maybe it's too much to see. And you have to kind of gauge your bandwidth. But also you do want to challenge yourself in terms of your ability to confront yourself. The easy thing to do is to kind of ignore things and either repress and not look at the reality of our psyche or these images that we're seeing in meditation. It also can be good to push ourselves to face what's uncomfortable. This is the meaning of voluntary suffering within Gurdjieff's writings, but also what Sama Vero reiterates too. We have to be willing to suffer voluntarily and to awaken consciousness through conscious works and voluntary sufferings. That often will mean, doing what we don't want to do, facing the part of ourselves that is ugly, and also facing our fears about why we don't want to see it. That's what I would recommend. We have a question. When facing downward toward, or when facing downward doing the Melchizedek meditation, it is difficult to put my face straight downwards. Is it okay to rest my face to one side, or have you any suggestions? Yeah, I mean, typically when I'm meditating on my stomach like that, I usually take a pillow and I'll put my head to my left or my right, depending on what's most comfortable at the time. And yeah, that's that's it. You don't have to be facing directly downward, but you can acquire any pillows or things that you need to make yourself comfortable. So yeah, that's fine. Okay, got another question. You mentioned earlier having a conversation with God like a relation. When you mean God, are you referring to the inner being or the angels or God of the universe? I don't know why I'm getting confused about that. Also, is Melchizedek the planet Earth being, or the being of the planet Earth? Yeah, so our inner being is our inner God. So I know we talked a lot about Kabbalah, and it can be get very intricate and nuanced, but our inner being is our own particular Father who is in heaven, our inner divinity. So when we're praying to our inner God, we're praying to Hesed, the Spirit, our innermost, our inner master, to help us approach the God of the planet Earth, which is Melchizedek. Our own inner God is our spirit, Hesed. And then Melchizedek is basically the master or the logos, we could say, the top trinity of the physical planet Earth. So Melchizedek is the highest divinity or master of this globe. That is the being of the earth. Our inner spirit is trying to develop into a master like Melchizedek. You know, a master like Melchizedek is an intelligence that can govern a cosmos, a planet. Our spirit may not be there yet, but through this initiatic work, our spirit can become initiated in that order, and we can become initiated in the order of Melchizedek so that our inner divinity gains power and abilities like that of Melchizedek himself. We have a question. I have a fear and anxiety around the depths of the symbolism and the techniques, having practiced in gnosis spaces before, and this being my first reintroduction to the notions for in a while. I guess I'm having a reaction based on my previous experience. Just wanted to vocalize. Yeah, I'll be honest with you too. I mean, I've been with a number of, you know, Gnostic groups associated with the tradition of Salman Vior, and unfortunately, I have firsthand experience witnessing a lot of things that were negative. It's not to say that the tradition itself is corrupt or inappropriate or wrong, but unfortunately, there are people who have, in a sense, out of fanaticism or dogmatism, maybe even fear mongering or really a cult like worship of the personality of Salman Vior, have transformed the teachings into something negative. The original source, obviously, for me, is a divine and sacred thing, and experience will show us. Now, I would recommend that when reintroducing yourself to some of the practices, like, take your time. Don't be perhaps maybe fanatical or jumping right in, but, practice at your level of ability and reflect on, what were your experiences that you had in those groups, and perhaps even reflect on whatever traumas associated with it. For me, I did suffer a lot with some groups that I was a part of, and but fortunately, despite those conflicts and sufferings, I did have a certain group of people or people in my life who were in the Gnostic tradition that, you know, were very helpful for me in my practice. And were never dogmatic or assertive or trying to force their way of thinking upon me. And so I really respect them and value not only their wisdom, but also their friendship and their support. But also, you know, I'd say that when practicing this type of meditations, take your time and become aware of your reactions. Like, observe that reaction in yourself. What about you is discomforted with this? What memories does it provoke? Maybe even what traumas it brings up. Um, you know, I'd also recommend working with the magic of the roses. The magic of the roses. I'm kind of laughing now because I'm just remembering the state of pain I was in at some points in my life in relationship to, some politics and groups and some sufferings related to it. But I remember getting out of that pain by working with Magic of the Roses. It's basically a practice, a video that Glorian Publishing provided. You can find it on their YouTube channel or even on Vimeo, I believe, and their website, glorian.org. That practice has really helped me a lot overcome some deep spiritual pain that I had experienced from the past. So that can help you in conjunction with, what you're trying to reapproach and, currently. So just something to think about. Okay. Checking to see if there's any other questions. I'm still looking. Okay. I see another one. I have a question that is off topic. If a female ties her tubes, will that impact alchemy for her and the man practicing? Um, it depends. Obviously, the physical sexual organs, our inner Malkut, our kingdom should be optimal, should be um, left to its own, natural processes. Um, Tubal litigation as well as vasectomies in men obviously affect the flow of sexual energy, and it can impact alchemy in that the forces don't have as much power. But it's not to say that one can't, in one sense, reverse the operation plus work with healing the body after the fact with the sacred rites for rejuvenation. It can and will impact alchemy in that those forces, in a sense, maybe not flowing as optimally as they should. But those damages can be healed through the work of the Holy Spirit by working with a marriage, but also working with sacred rites for rejuvenation, and even considering maybe even um, having one's. Well, I'm not a doctor, but I don't know the from firsthand experience about that. But operations that people do to either reverse or there might be that case too. I'm not so entirely certain, but the thing to remember is that these energies exist in the vital body, and that even though one may have that operation done, the vital forces are still in existence and one can still work with them. But yes, I mean, the flow of the energies may be impacted, and they won't be perhaps optimal, as I was saying. Yeah, and that the thing and to tie that into the lecture, our physical body is a kingdom. It has many forces, and we want them to flow in accordance with their proper order. So the natural function of the creative energy is to not just to procreate and create physical children, but to create the soul. And those forces, like the forces of Melchizedek, which come from above down into our body, we want to return them to divinity. And so we want to keep our body functioning in its best capacities, especially when we're operating with divine nature. I know people often think of, procreation or orgasm for pleasure as the natural functioning of the sexual organs, but actually that's a deviation. The natural divine way, superior nature, like the forces of Melchizedek, which operate in the center of the earth, spiritually speaking, which can flow in a superior way, is to transmute. That is the really divine, natural way, divine nature, not animal nature. So we want our body to be, um, you know, we got to take care of our body, basically, so to speak. Okay, I know we ran over, but any other final comments, questions? We can conclude. I know it's a lot of detail. You're welcome to listen to it on the podcast. We'll have this available as a video as well, or it's available for online. Yeah, and also if you ever anyone's coming to Chicago for a class, we're still giving classes in public. We do perform this meditation on Saturday the 13th. The next one will be December 13th. Okay, so thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Uh, Gemar Chatima Tova. Many blessings. May you be sealed in the book of life according to Yom Kippur. All the best.